Hello, everyone, and welcome to RootsTech 2016. This is Bernice Alexander Bennett, and I am so happy to sit here before you with wonderful, outstanding, enthusiastic African American genealogists who will share their stories with you today. And on my left,
Angela Walton-Raji of the African Roots Podcast.
on my right,
Janis Forte of the Afro-American Genealogical and Historical Society of Chicago.
Shelley Murphy, Family Tree Girl.
Kathleen Brandt, A3 Genealogy.
oh, this is such an exciting opportunity for us to be here at Roots Tech. And so, one of the major things has been a focus on telling your stories. So, why don't we start with you, Angela? Just talk about the importance of sharing your story and telling your story.
Oh my goodness. Well, one of the things that I have found that telling your own story, it's more than just passing information out. I have found that I have had personal benefits from telling the story. It's given me a chance not only to just reflect, but it's been something that's changed my life in particular. I have found by sharing my story, for example, from Indian Territory, from the Choctaw Nation, just sharing that story is what drove me initially in 1993 to write my book, the first edition of my book, because I discovered a record set of over 14,000 African Americans who lived in Indian Territory. And getting, I guess, the nerve to tell the story, not just my own story of the Waltons who were slaves at one point in the Choctaw Nation and my Perry ancestors, my life has changed tremendously, including the fact that a descendant of the slaveholder found me. This person contacted me and went out of his way to reach out. We have become close, and it's just something that has just opened so many doors. Having the courage to tell your story, because I believe that it does require courage to do that. But oh my gosh, it's led me down some new paths, and there's no return. It's something that's just
Yes,
it's tremendous.
and it's just great to hear you talk about courage.
Yes.
Well, let's turn to you.
Well, I began researching back in the early 80s. I am the granddaughter of slaves. My father's father was born in 1860 Greene County, Alabama. And when I was a young girl growing up in Chicago, my father, T.C. Minor, used to take me to a lot of public events, so where they did soapbox political speeches. And he also used to talk to me about his ancestry. And as I grew, he began to challenge me for me to go to Greene County, Alabama, and learn more about his heritage. My dad only went to the third grade in Greene County and in lower Mississippi, but he was one of the smartest men that I knew. So several years later, in discussing the heritage of the family and talking about where Dad had come from, we decided to start a family newsletter. And just
wonderful.
this last December, our family newsletter, driver family communicator, turned 18 years old. And that is our primary way of sharing the story, not just of Jackson Minor and his wife Elizabeth, but also of my dad, my mom, and my driver's side, is that we tell the story in this family newsletter that has been going on. So in doing the genealogy and the research, I've just been amazed over the years to find out just how much hard work and energy our people went into to bring us all here today. They were true survivors, and hopefully our descendants will be too.
Right. Okay, Shelley.
Well, I grew up with one grandmother. All the other grandparents had passed on prior to me coming in 1952. My mother pretty much was carrying the torch of the family historian, and so I am the next in line taking on that charge. We have such mixed ancestry, we don't know where a lot of people come from. So learning and hearing those stories that have been passed down now is my drive to keep the next generations. I don't have grandchildren at this time, but I have so many nieces, cousins, and distant cousins, and getting that information out. And I use social media as in to share the story with the other members of my family.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
In my story, I do use social media, but what I like to use to tell my story is DNA. So we use a lot of the DNA tools to help decipher and to pretty much figure out what family unit and group my mixed family comes from. My family is from the Appalachians, and we can trace back to 1807. And in that case, however, two of our ancestors passed for white, and many of them married into the free colored families. So we have been using DNA to connect to our other cousins around the world, including our Irish cousins. And I love just telling the story from a diverse point of view and sharing the bloodline.
Yes, yes. Well, I have a story also. And this story began with my grandmother. And my grandmother lived to be almost 106 years old. And she told me one story that I have shared with everyone, and that was that her granddaddy owned a lot of land. Now, it's because she told me this story, I'm all into land. I wanted to find out, where did he get the land? How did he get the land? Who owns the land now? How did he lose the land? But that's part of my journey of learning about my grandfather and learning about all the people that were associated with my grandfather so that I could tell that story. And in fact, I said grandfather, but for me, it's really my great-grandfather.
Right.
But it's a story that I have enjoyed sharing with everyone. Well, we're ready to wrap up, and I want to thank you all for sharing your story. You talked about courage, you talked about newsletters, you talked about your mixed race ancestry and DNA. I mean, we have so many opportunities to just share and tell that story. Thank you so much,
Thank
and
you.
continue to enjoy Roots Tech 2016.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.